Good afternoon from Staffordshire Police Headquarters. Welcome to Policing TV. Delighted to be here with DCI Amy Martin. Amy, thank you so much for joining us here on Policing TV and also for giving us permission to film from time to time following your future career. Really grateful to you for that. Let's start by just taking you back to your joining the police, and you joined in West Midlands rather than in Staffordshire. Why was it? What led you to join the police?
So I was quite young when I joined. I was 19, which is unusual back then, but seems to be the norm now. I was actually, prior to being in the police, a wedding planner, an events organiser for a golf club, so quite a different career when you think about it. But my dad was the sergeant in the police. I didn't grow up with policing. He didn't join until I was about 14, but just his experiences and stuff really interested me. Staffordshire weren't actually recruiting at the time. I'm Staffordshire born and bred, but West Midlands were, and my dad was part of West Midlands Police, so I thought I'll give that a go. Seems like a really interesting career, lots of prospects, and it just the human element of policing really interested me. So I applied. Ended up being really successful in my application and all the processes that followed, and landed at West Midlands Police at the start of 2009.
So you were telling me earlier that you were a little bit surprised that you got the job, as it were, and
yeah, I think it's just based. I was very young. I was 19 when I joined, and like I said, it was not normal then, I suppose. Now we have lots of young people joining the police straight from university. Our student cohort really across Staffordshire and across policing now are within that age bracket. But for me, it wasn't. I was the youngest out of my whole cohort. Generally, people were, late 20s, 30s, and had had prior careers. So I thought they'd probably want a bit more life experience. But I think what I didn't necessarily appreciate was a lot of the skills that you pick up in hospitality industry. So I'd have probably learned a lot more than I gave myself credit for.
So where did you get posted to?
So my first posting was the F3 OCU back in the day, which is Handsworth, Aston, Lascelles, which was infamously one of the busiest areas within West Midlands to police. Quite notorious for gang crime, organised criminality, urban street gangs, violence, etc. So I was really excited to be posted there. I think my parents were mildly horrified at the time, if I remember rightly, but I was really looking forward to it. Like I said, born and bred Staffordshire, very much grew up in countryside village, so it was very different for me. But it was a really exciting opportunity.
So for those outside the UK, as you've described, this is not a quiet, leafy suburb. This is thrown in right at the coal face, pretty much.
Yeah.
And you enjoyed it?
Yeah, you didn't have time really to think about it. You were, like I say, thrown in at the deep end, and it made me learn really quickly. So being thrown into an environment like that in the middle of urban Birmingham, with all the problems that they've got locally, some of the challenges that we face with policing, you just picked up everything really, really quickly, and I'm really grateful for that, actually. And the skills that it gave me, the confidence, and all the work that we did in the community was a really good founding, I think, for my career.
I think it's the first. Well, I know it's the first time that I have ever heard of wedding planning as being a suitable grounding for policing in quite a difficult area of the West Midlands Police. So tell us about how your policing career then developed.
So when I landed my neighbourhood, I went into neighbourhood policing, and my patch was the Soho Road, which is very, very busy. Really culturally diverse, lots of challenges, and I really enjoyed it. Neighbourhood policing, I think, was a fantastic opportunity to get to know local people, and that bit that I spoke about earlier about just being the human side to policing, understanding people's stories. So I quite quickly, because of all the urban street gang problems and organised criminality within that area, got to know a lot of the local gang members, and we'd get chatting to them. A lot of them were a similar age to me, so that we got some commonalities in how I could communicate with them and talk to them. And what really interested me about them was the background story, the vulnerability. Why did you end up here? How did you get, involved in this? And that really developed an interest for me in organised crime, urban street gangs, and sort of serious violence, really. I then went on, I did a stint on response and quickly went into specialist policing. So I went onto the local gangs team, which was based within Handsworth, and my remit was to look at urban street gangs. And I always floated towards the younger cohort, and was, even from early on in my career, looking at ways that I could divert them, get them out of that lifestyle, understand what led them to be like that, and put whatever support I could in place. But also I was still doing proactive policing operations around gang criminality. I was there for probably 18 months and then merged into the Force gangs team. So we sat under what was the SOCU then, the Serious Organised Crime Unit. We looked at much more like an OCG element to it, so much more of the organised criminality, the higher end of that organised element of gang crime. Lots of firearms jobs that we did, drugs warrants, all, you know, really interesting stuff, and I learnt a lot there.
So how long into your policing service was this then?
So I'd probably only got about 2 years. So I'd done my probation, I got signed off early really with probation, did quite well with getting all that done. And yeah, it's about after 2 years I moved into the local gangs team, and 18 months on there, and then into the serious organised crime.
So as a police constable, not yet as a detective constable?
Not yet. When I moved on to the serious organised crime team was when I did my investigations exam. So I did that and started my detectives portfolio whilst I was there. So again, great opportunities, and surrounded by some really experienced people who really helped me on that journey.
So how did that work? You're 2 years in. You said I think you joined at 19, so you're so very early 20s.
Yeah.
And you might well have been surrounded by some very experienced police officers. What was that like as a younger police officer?
Yeah.
Probably not looking too much like the typical police officer in that team at the time.
No, I mean I wasn't. I was the only girl, so I was the only female on the team. I was shortly joined by another, so there was 2 of us amongst I think 18, so 2 out of 18. And it was a challenge. You're right. There was a lot of quite old school attitudes towards who should be on those teams. But I think that drove me even more to prove myself. I knew what I was doing. I've got good relationships with these individuals who understood the background, and actually that vulnerability side to it, and understanding how they came to be where they were, knowing the families, doing that mapping, that wider thinking, really helped with the development of a lot of the operations. So for me, yes, it was difficult, and yeah, there was I can remember instances of the team going out and then dropping the paperwork on my desk as the girl on the team. So it was a challenge, but rose to it. And I mean, it was a much better environment as we left, much more diverse. We got a lot more women onto the team. And fundamental to that actually was we had a female sergeant who came across, and I mean, she was a force to be reckoned with, and really, really helped me in my career and to be more confident in that environment.
So some of those old school behaviours were discouraged, were stopped, and although some of those, as I'm referring to it, old school behaviours would have been a real challenge in those relatively early days, that's something that was largely put aside a little later on in your career as a police constable and subsequently a detective constable.
Yeah.
Let's move forward then into you were with West Midlands for a number of years as latterly a detective constable. Let's move things forward to a little later in your career as a detective constable, and just tell us something about the policing experiences that you went through and some of the life experience challenges that you went through as well.
Gosh, okay. So I really wanted to, I actually was a qualified sergeant for a number of years as well, but really wanted to focus on honing my skills as a detective, I suppose, and getting into some of the complex investigations that we used to run there. what I found myself gravitating towards was that preventative side. So towards the end of my time at West Midlands as a DC, I started, along with one of the sergeants there and a couple of others, leading the prevent team for the gang side of things. So working within the local community, schools, youth centres, really focusing on that preventative side of it. And it opened my eyes to, lots of different ways of thinking. And again, was another challenge because it was a big culture change. So there was a lot of, I suppose, questions. Why are you in a youth club? Why are we doing this? You're a police officer, you're a detective. Well, actually, in the grand scheme of things, what we're trying to do is protect some really vulnerable people. And that really interested me and stuck with me. So I applied whilst I was on maternity leave, came and did all the recruitment process, and came over to Staffs in September 2019. And I landed here as a detective transferee into Lichfield, CID at the time. And then in October 2019, the PC to Inspector fast track process was announced. And I've been recommended to go on that a couple of times at West Midlands, but didn't because I just loved what I did, and I loved where I was. And rightly or wrong, there's different reasons behind why you shouldn't do something like that, isn't there? But really enjoyed it. But here, it was just a brilliant opportunity for me. So I applied for that, was successful in the internal process, and then the subsequent national assessment centre that you have to go on. And I think it was one of the best things I did as a transferee, in particular, because I got to know Staffordshire really quickly, and part of the PC to Inspector fast track process is rotations, to gain your exposure to local policing, to professional standards, to custody, and all those areas that potentially you hadn't been in previously. And I mean, I've just told you about my background. I've done 13 years really in serious organised crime and gangs and all that kind of world. So moving over here, I was like, how do you use the radio again? What are the call signs? What's the setup in local policing? So it was brilliant for me to go in and learn all that and be thrown back into that world. So I did stints in neighbourhood in response as a sergeant. Really steep learning curve for me, but really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed getting back into that, and then getting that exposure across Staffordshire, building up a brilliant network of individuals around me. One of my gaps that I'd got for me personally was I wanted to understand child protection. Having never really done the traditional side to child protection work, I'd done a lot around exploitation, around young people at risk with the gangs work and the organised criminality side of things, but I'd never done that. So I'd planned in to my rotations a stint as a DS in child protection, and landed in that post and instantly fell in love with that. And I ended up extending my attachment there, to the point I was then promoted in post as an inspector in child protection, and I've kind of remained in the PPU vulnerability area ever since.
That was fast track constable to inspector.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, the opportunity to fast track, a second fast track emerged. Yeah. Describe that for us.
Yeah, so I did my stint of being an inspector, and then I led a lot of the working force around child exploitation, and where we were as an organisation for that. So found myself in a temporary DCI post, and then the fast track for inspector to superintendent process came out, and this was last year actually. So I've been in post for a short while as a DCI at that point, and I just thought, what an opportunity. I know I've already done one, so sometimes I do question if I'm a little bit insane putting myself through all these processes again, because it is hard work. But my experience of the fast track PC to inspector was really good, and there is a lot of, it is what you put in, you gain the effort that you put in. You have to be proactive as a candidate on that to get the most out of it. But I had a really good experience. I still, my motivations for being promoted and for going up is to influence and to change. and to make a better place for police officers, for staff who work for us, and ultimately our communities. I can do that as a DI and as DCI, but I can do that even better if I am a superintendent, or my future ambitions for potentially being part of the exec team. So that's what drove me. I did an internal process here, which was interesting. It was hard. And then you go to National Assessment Centre, which is 2 days worth of assessments, boards. There's lots of scenario-based stuff that you do there as well. It was successful, and that programme started in May officially. So I've been on that journey. Get loads of support from the College of Policing and inputs, and the exec team here have been fantastic in supporting that. We are the first, so there's not been this before. There's been lots of variations of high development schemes, but not a inspector to superintendent. So we are the guinea pigs in some respects.
Well, you've very kindly said that Policing TV can follow your future career over the coming months and years, and thank you so much for that. In bringing this first video, though, to a close, I'm just going to invite you to say something about your proudest. What you look back on your career to date, and I'm sure there's much that lies ahead. What of your policing career to date are you most proud of, do you think?
I think I have 3 things, actually. One was setting up the prevent team for the gangs, because it had not been done before, and it was a very new way of thinking. And some of the children really that we safeguarded in that was one of the proudest outcomes. Secondly would be my work around trauma in Staffordshire Police. So I'm the TRIM coordinator, which is trauma incident management. And we've really driven that in force for the last, I've had that for 2 years. To the point, we dealt with over 450 police officers and staff last year for trauma incident management. We now have other forces and organisations coming to Staffordshire asking how we do it. And just the support, really, because I've been on the other end of it, where you've been to really traumatic incidents and you've not had that support. So I wanted to ensure that Staffordshire are much better at that. So I'm really, really proud of TRIM and the team that sit behind it and where we are. And then thirdly, the child exploitation teams. So child exploitation was my project, really. For the last few years, I really wanted to get us to a better position in Staffordshire for it, and focus on the adults and the offenders and be much more proactive in what we do. Learn from all the national learning that's been around exploitation and set up some really proactive teams, and we've managed to do that. So I now have the 2 child exploitation teams, one in the north of Staffordshire, one in the county. We've exceeded 100 arrests since January for people, adults who are exploiting children, and have some really, really successful policing operations around it, and hopefully are driving that attitude change and culture change in how we deal with exploitation. So those are probably my 3 proudest.
It's an impressive, wonderful, inspiring story you've told there, Amy. Thank you so much for that. I am so looking forward to Policing TV following you over future months and beyond, and we'll look in more detail at some of those things that you've mentioned and further work that you and colleagues here in Staffordshire Police and potentially more widely are doing. But for the time being, Detective Chief Inspector Amy Martin, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.